Bang! Neeves Knives. I'm Jared, and this is 5 awesome knives and why these knives are awesome. But in this one, we are going to also talk about the negative side to some of these knives. Now, the first knife is the BENCHMADE 940-1. So originally, this came with carbon fiber scales. It's got the titanium scales on it. I keep saying I'm going to switch it back to the carbon fiber, and I'm going to because it does have some side-to-side. The lock is super strong, but it does have a little side-to-side play, and you can't get rid of it. With my carbon fiber scales, it's super solid. But this is the version in S90V. And the awesome thing about this knife, or the amazing thing about this knife, is it's somewhat of a multi-tool. And I say that because one, well, it's a compact EDC, first of all. Very slim in the pocket, very easy to carry. Neutral ergo, so regardless if you're holding it backwards, forwards, pinch grip, fits in everybody's hand for the most part. Very neutral. The blade length is long enough to do most tasks, but it's rather thick. So the geometry on this isn't the best slicing geometry. Does it cut? Of course it does. But because of its thicker geometry, you can do things with this that you might not want to do with something that's very, very slicey. And the way the tip and the grind is set up, if you look at the swedge right here, you can see the spine thickness. It gives you a swedge right here. So when you're slicing, it helps bring material over the spine of the knife when you are slicing. But then the tip is like a swedge. So it helps reinforce the strength of the tip to prevent it from chipping. And can you chip this tip? Of course you can. But it's pretty durable enough to do, very light duty prying, like some tasks that you might not do with another knife's tip. And when you're on a job site and things like that, this can be a very versatile tool. So, it can do light duty cutting very easily, and it can do some of the harder tasks very easily while still being a nice compact EDC. The lock is incredibly strong. So the Axis lock, one of the strongest locking systems. Mine I have sharpened at 15 degrees per side to help increase the cutting performance because of it having such thick geometry. And mine's been sharpened quite a bit. Now, another awesome thing about this knife is that the warranty. Benchmade's warranty is one of the best warranties you can possibly get. So, when I'm finished with this blade after I've sharpened it to death and it's been used all to hell, I can pay for a new blade. It's like $40, between 20 and $40, depending on what steel you have. So that's an awesome thing when you have, your user knife, a knife that you love so much and, you get used to it and it's like your multi-tool. Now, what are the negative sides of this? It's awesome because it's kind of a multi-tool. It can do light duty tasks really good and some of the harder use. Well, the negative side is that everything in between that, it's not going to be the best at. So it's not going to be the world's best slicer. It's not going to be the best at, say cutting apples, slicing cardboard, cutting things that a lot of EDC tasks do. Now, can it do it? Of course it can, but it's not going to be something you're going to want to do long term, especially if you have the choice to have another knife that's going to slice incredibly, very well. You say it's fine until you grab another knife that does it 5 times better. And then you realize, yeah, I would totally grab this knife over something like this. But great EDC, one of the most iconic Benchmades ever made. Let's get to the next one. Now, going off of that one, we have the TERZUOLA. Now, this is it's a compact version of his. So, all right, let me back up. Bob TERZUOLA. Bob TERZUOLA is the one who invented and made the tactical knife. He made it, I forget what year, but it was a long time ago. I actually reviewed it. It was originally in 440C, and it was blade shaped just like this, a spear point blade, but with a hollow grind, and it was nice and robust, kind of like the Benchmade 940, but it was quite a bit bigger. I forget the exact length, but it was like 9 inches long. And it was a liner lock just like this, except for a lot larger. You can watch my video on it if you'd like to. Now, or at least very similar to this. Now, this shrinks that down into a compact version. So it's a compact tactical knife. Tactical meaning it's versatile. It can go in the jungle and do, jungle stuff. It can be a self-defense knife. It can break down, skinning animals and break down, animals and things like that. If if you're in that situation where you need to, hunt and break down, food and things like that. It can go good in urban environments as well as in the woods. It's just a jack of all trades kind of EDC knife while also being good for self-defense and fighting. That's kind of like the idea behind a tactical knife. Now, this being a shrunken down compact version is not going to be as capable as the bigger one, but the awesome thing about it is kind of like the 940. It has a thicker, more robust geometry and a small compact EDC, so it's going to be a little bit more durable than some of your slicey knives. The tip on it is rather robust. This is actually a little bit more robust than the 940. And it's not the best cutter, because of that reason, but it can get you by. You could do light duty prying with it. The tip can puncture and stab into things without chipping or breaking. The action on it's really good. The flipper tab's a little pokey, but it has titanium liners, a titanium clip, and it does have a titanium stud. It comes in different options. It is built by We, but the original one was a USA made one by Bob TERZUOLA. Now, that's his symbol right there. S35 VN blade steel. So the awesome things about this, it takes a tactical knife and shrinks it down into a small version of a tactical knife. So you can basically, have a versatile knife that's not good at one thing, but it's good at everything. Just not great at everything, if that makes sense. So it can basically do everything, but it's not great at anything. But it does make it to where it's a little more versatile. Now, the negative things, kind of like the 940, it's not going to be the best cutter. Now, to increase the cutting performance, kind of like the 940, I laid back the angle to 15 degrees per side. Now, the edge bevel's nice and big, but it cuts so much better. This knife cuts way, way better than it was with its 22 degree per side angle. Now on this one, I did something a little different. I did a very shallow angle on one side and a big old 15 degree per side angle on the other. So it's kind of like a chisel grind, but not really. So basically I put a 15 degree angle on this side. Come on. So you can see how big the edge bevel is. And then on this side, I did like a 22 degree angle, I think it was, 22.5 degree or something on this side. You can see how small the edge bevel is, nice and tiny. But that dramatically changed the cutting performance of this knife. It made it from a knife that I didn't really like to cut with to a knife that I love to cut with now. Now, what would really help it out is to put a hollow grind on it like the original Bob TERZUOLA tactical knife. But, in the original one was still robust. It was just a hollow grind robust knife. But awesome knife. I do really like this knife. And, yeah, shout out to Lavender Pants, by the way. Next, we have the MEDFORD Slim MIDI. So, what is awesome about this? Well, what's awesome about this is that MEDFORD was always known for these ridiculous, chunky, big, thick, heavy-duty knives that are in most cases ridiculous. Most cases, you're not going to grab that knife to use it for anything. This one's actually a little bit more versatile than a lot of his knives, like the Praetorian. The Praetorian's ridiculous. It's a knife it makes a big statement and it's cool and it's fun, but it's never the knife you're going to grab to use. I would argue with anybody about that. That's not a knife you grab and you use for anything really. Maybe prying, but that's about the only thing I can think of. Now this actually you can use. It does have a pretty decent hollow grind and it is the size of a fixed blade, so it's very robust. This is the MEDFORD USMC fighter folder, but the Slim MIDI took all the awesomeness, I guess, of a MEDFORD and put it into an EDC package without being dramatically crazy. This is actually extremely slim. It's a very slim knife. I can even take the BENCHMADE 940, a lot of people know, and it's just as thick as a 940, and a 940 is very slim. So this, but it also is nice and tall. So in the hand, it actually feels even slimmer than the 940. The blade stock is nice and thin. It does have a nice hollow ground blade, and you can tell it's hand done because of the way the pattern turns right here. So that tells you that this was done by hand. If it was done by a machine, it would be straight across. But he also, now this was something out of his wheelhouse, right? Something he doesn't normally do. Normally his stuff is really big, dramatic, thick, robust. It was a very slim EDC knife. Now another thing was he used bearings. I'm not positive, but this might have been the first time he ever used bearings on a knife. So you have amazing action. A lot of his knives are very stiff. Not saying they don't wind up getting smooth, but out of the box, they're usually very, very stiff and not the easiest to deploy, and they definitely don't drop shut. Eventually, maybe, after they break in, I remember holding a Marauder, a full size, because there's other versions of this. The Marauder's a big beast of a knife, and that one is on washers, and the one I held was really smooth. But this comes right out of the box, very smooth, really good sound, titanium handles, S35 VM, beautiful fuller that's easy to get to, right-handed or left-handed. Now, this is a super slim compact knife that just, works for just about anything. It's not a hard use knife or anything like that, but it is great for EDC. Beautiful blade shape, great drop point blade. It's going to be a very versatile EDC knife. Now, what are the negative things about this knife? Well, I don't know why, but he puts these squares right here, yet doesn't cut out access to the lock bar. And because it's so slim and the blade is so slim, the gap in here is tight. It's super tight. So you have to come around to the front and basically use this little swedge right there to push the lock bar over. And it's not, some people's came with really strong lock bars. This one's not too bad, but all of Medford's have pretty strong lock bars, so that also makes it more difficult. And if he would have just cut this out right here, it would be so much better. Next thing, because he does these hand hollows, his plunge grinds aren't the best, and you wind up getting a smile. A smile is when your sharpening hits the plunge grind, and the plunge grind is basically the taper between the thickest part down to the edge. So from here to the edge is a plunge, and you see how the edge kind of smiles up right there. Kind of looks like your cheeks when you're smiling. That is a smile. So that's what's negative about this. The next thing, some people would say the price, but it is a USA made knife. Now, same thing with the BENCHMADE. Next is the SPYDERCO GAYLE Bradley. I love this knife. This is one of the best work knives / users in my opinion. Now, opened up, it has a super thin hollow grind. Mine gets down to about 10 thousandths behind the edge. And it's CPM M4 steel. Now, the blade shape, this is my favorite blade shape. One of my favorites, if not my favorite. It's a spear point blade. Now, because of the hole deployment, you can't really tell it almost looks like a drop point. But if you take away this hole, that the edge and the spine do the same thing. Now, it's a spear point blade. And it has great access to the tip, good access to a small amount of belly, so not too much to where it's not good for EDC, and then a long edge. You can get up nice and tight to that edge. The ergos are super comfortable with any grip. Reverse grips, cutting straps. I love this knife for cutting straps because I have so much leverage pulling back through a cut. But yeah, it's just super comfortable in the hand. The grind and the blade shape is great for everything. And excellent at most things. So it's a versatile blade shape while also being excellent. So what are the negative things? Well, one thing is these things have about the weakest detents ever. Gayle Bradley, and now the original one, the Advocate, the Gayle Bradley Advocate, that one was a frame lock, and it was a titanium frame lock, and it had a good detent. This, on the other hand, does not. It is basically non-existent. So using the hole deployment, yes, you can use it, but it's very slouchy. You have to mean to flick it. Now you can flick it, especially if you're good at flicking, but you have to mean to do it. So that does kind of suck. It's more of a slow rolling action, which isn't that big of a deal, but you know, you like a detent to hold your blade in a little bit better, and you know, it would just be better if it had a detent and had a little bit better action. Next thing, excuse me, is lock bar access. He did not give any lock bar access. I had to modify this. So originally this had fake carbon fiber scales, and I actually got these scales right here from Slicey Dicey. Slicey Dicey sent me these micarta scales, but in order to access the lock bar, I had to cut this back because it was so bad, like it would stop me from carrying it. I wouldn't even carry it because it was just that ridiculous. Now, I've heard some people say it doesn't bother them as much, but 98% of people, it drives nuts. So I say if you buy one of these, you have to modify it. In my opinion, it's a must. But amazing knife, one of the best work knives. Now, last on the list is the TWOSUN TS301. Now, the TWOSUN TS301, this is such a good TWOSUN. One of their best TWOSUN models. Now, and I mean that from fit, finish, action, just everything, like feeling like amazing quality. The thumb studs are perfect thumb studs. They are so good. You can see they're kind of geared, but they offer a nice big placement for your thumb, a nice good leverage point to push off of, so you have a ton of leverage into your thumb flick. And because they do stand a little proud of the scales, you have a good spot to also reverse flick. The detent is really good on this, and you have a ton of leverage, so the action is amazing. When it drops, I had to actually tighten my pivot a little bit more because this was a straight guillotine. It's still very smooth and still does just drop, but I did tighten it up a little bit because it was a little too guillotine. Now, what's really awesome about this is, yes, the fit, finish. It's such a good quality knife. It's built extremely well. And I like the micarta and carbon fiber combination, but the geometry of this blade, this thing gets down super thin behind the edge. I think mine was 12 thousandths, I believe. It was 12 thousandths behind the edge, and it's such a broad blade. They did a perfect sharpening choil. You get a nice and tight to the blade. The ergos are super comfortable. So you have maximum amount of leverage into your cuts. You can use this knife to cut multiple layers of cardboard because the geometry is so good and you have so much leverage into your cut. It's a cutting beast. And like I said, it's just super comfortable. If you're wondering what these two screws are, that is actually to your stop pin. So you don't have to remove the scales if you do have to change out your stop pin. That's all that's for the steel lock bar insert, because this is all titanium. So we have a titanium frame lock basically with an overlay. I wouldn't even consider this a liner lock because it's, it's as thick as a frame lock, which is also another thing that's awesome about it. You get contouring from the scales, but the lock strength and durability of a frame lock. Another awesome thing is that the thumb studs are also the stop pin. Hinderer does that. MEDFORD does that on some knives. You can see right there. So Hinderer knives do that with their thumb studs as well. And in this case, the thumb studs are very easy to access and easy to deploy and make a very strong lockup, because side to side, the blade can't really move side to side because it's hitting the frame. And it's also a nice large stop pin, especially in this case with the thumb studs being so large, it makes an incredible strong lockup. Now, the negatives is, well, there's actually two. One, and this one's not that big of a deal, but the new versions that just recently came out are all in D2. This one's in 14C. Now, a lot of people ask me, would you still get it? Yes, absolutely. It's not that big of a deal. There's actually a couple good parts about it and then negatives. The negative parts is that you're stainless, you're not going to have great stainless steel, so you're going to take care of it a little bit more. Not that big of a deal. Oil your blade, clean your blade off. Next thing is that the edge retention should be pretty similar in my opinion, but sometimes 14C is easier to do than D2, so that's arguable, but either way, I don't think you'll notice on an edge retention place, but 14C does take a fine edge better than D2. D2 doesn't take a fine edge that well, so, but that's not that big of a deal. You don't have to have a mirror polished edge on this. I personally would, I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter to me. I would put a mirror polished edge or 1,000 grit. D2 does really good between 600 and 1,000 grit. I personally don't like to take it over 1,000 grit. Even when it does hold its bite, it loses it very quickly when you start using it. Now, then the next negative thing, or wait, there's a positive to that too. The positive thing is that the 14C with this satin finish is super fingerprinty. The D and scratchy. Look at how scratched up my blade is. My blade is super scratched up. I don't know if the camera's going to pick it up, but there are a lot of scratches on this thing. Now, the D2 one won't be like that. The D2 one will be a little bit more scratch resistant. It's not really coming up on the camera, but anyways, there's a lot. It's all scratched up. But the D2 will be a little bit more scratch resistant and fingerprint resistant. At least a little bit more. Even the slow roll is good on this thing. The lockup, super solid. Rock solid. Now, the next negative thing is that this blade shape. While it's so good for slicing, it also has this big old belly. So one, that can help you slip out of cuts. When you are cutting, even though it's such a good cutter, it can slip out of cuts, and it's not going to be good at detailing work. Can you get by with using the tip? Yeah, but you're losing all your leverage lifting up your arm. So your elbow's going to have to go so high to use it that you're not going to be able to use it through dense things, and you're not going to want to use it for a long period of time. You're not going to have the control. You're going to have to use the belly. And when you use the belly for those type of cuts, you end up damaging more of the edge than you need to if you were able to just use the tip. So those are the negative things, but I still think the good things outweigh the negatives, and it is an incredible, incredible knife. And as long as you're not doing utility cuts all day, this knife will get you by just fine. And in many cases, exceptionally, this thing will be a champion cutter for you, for sure. But yeah, the one other little thing is I do wish the lock bar access was a little bit better. Now it's fine. I never really worried about it. Somebody brought it up to me that it drove them nuts, and it didn't really bother me. But, I guess some people might think that this is a little pokey, but to me it's not that big of a deal. D10's nice and early, easy to get past, amazing action, perfectly centered. Finish is just on point. But yeah, there you guys go. I love you guys. Thank you guys for watching. Peace.